A lot of celebrated moments in the history of video games involve the satisfying death of adversity after a challenging boss fight. Be it Psycho Mantis, Bowser, or any of the Colossi, well-made boss fights are exclusive touchstones that define entire generations of games and the people who grew up playing them. Or at least, they used to. In its undeniable progression with the development of graphics and storytelling, the medium has sacrificed a lot of what made it so special in the first place. Now, much like yin and yang, for every boss fight that was strategically challenging and once revolutionary, there are several disappointing and insulting ones that tarnish otherwise phenomenal video games. My name is Rach, welcome back to WhatCulture Gaming. These are 10 phenomenal video games with shockingly bad boss fights. 10. The Evil Within 2. Yes, The Evil Within 2 fixed its predecessor's robotic characters, overly convoluted story, and intrusive black bars, but it failed to deliver boss battles that were anywhere near as terrifying. In the original, Laura and the Keeper were recurring nightmares who forced you to quickly improvise, exploit the environment, and manage your gear as you avoided being insta-killed in tight quarters with traps everywhere. This claustrophobic horror and panic was something the sequel sorely lacked. With Tango Gameworks having removed traps and one-hit kills almost completely, thanks to an overcompensating desire to please all those critics who raged about its Forerunner's difficulty. The tight halls were also replaced with breathable open spaces that made it easy to avoid up-close conflict, and the bosses' designs were largely underwhelming, with one being a lazy rip-off of Scarecrow's nightmares from Arkham Asylum, and the other a pretentious artist with a poor aim, and the final a generic monster of Sebastian's wife. It's telling that the only good boss fights in the entire game were a lullaby-singing siren and Father Theodore, only because they took you back to Beacon and literally recycled the last game's scarier monsters. 9. Mass Effect 2. As far as the final levels fare, the suicide mission in Mass Effect 2 is still one of the best in video game history, thanks to all your actions, decisions, and preparation having multiple ramifications for your squad and ending. The final boss, however, was not so good. Not only was the Human Reaper a dull sci-fi cliché and a goofy machine with more weak points than the Death Star, but he was a primarily dumb bullet sponge whose weak attacks could be avoided by hiding behind cover the entire time. He also suffered from a soul pattern that kindly offered you recurring breaks to collect your ammo and have your shields regenerate. It was far from being the petrifying final boss the level deserved, but at least the game's narrative avoided ending on a whimper by fading out on the unforgettable image of the Reapers travelling to Earth. 8. Bioshock Infinite. Even the most die-hard Bioshock fan would be lying to themselves by pretending that the underwater city of Rapture was home to satisfying boss battles. However, despite being predictable and one-note, the Big Daddies did have unnerving and unique designs that made them visually memorable, a constellation Infinite does not share. Although one could moan about Infinite's difficulty spike before its famous ending, the battle that deserves to be lamented the most is the war with Elizabeth's mother, Lady Comstock. One hell of a pissed-off siren who epitomised the common phrase, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned." Lady Comstock was an unfair boss for players who hadn't upgraded the right weapons or vigors. Not only did she raise hordes of enemies from the dead to assist her, but her arena had very few places to cover, meaning you repeatedly died thanks to being overwhelmed by bullets spraying you from every angle. Essentially, it was a slog that had you cursing in anger as you wished for nothing more than a return to the compelling story. 7. Deus Ex: Human Revolution. Deus Ex: Human Revolution would have been one of the greatest stealth titles if, like Dishonored, it allowed you to stay true to your non-lethal and sneaky approach when encountering its main baddies. Alas, it did not, and that is why all of its boss battles sucked. While they were fun for anyone who had a blast cutting off limbs off of every mercenary, for those who wanted to stay in the shadows and stick to a non-killing code like Batman, the boss fights were a middle finger to the face. Not only that, but they were mindless encounters where strategy was eliminated entirely for the good old duck, shoot and run, resulting in every boss, besides Jar and Namir, clashing with the game's otherwise intelligent gameplay. Certain die-hard fans will leap to the defense of Eidos Montreal by insisting that you could defeat the bosses non-lethally. But the counter to that feeble rebuttal is that they remain murdered in the following cutscenes. 6. Dead Space 2. After suffering from another 12-hour nightmare full of adult, children, and even baby necromorphs, Dead Space 2 culminated with you finally getting to destroy the marker and officially break up with your demonic ex. As everyone will tell you, and rightfully so, the Hive from Dead Space sucked as a final boss. Still, it was at least a grotesque fiend that gave you the heebie-jeebies, unlike the marker and Isaac's clingy girlfriend. The problem was that, instead of being scary, the long-awaited confrontation was irritating due to being a massive clusterfuck, where swarms of shadowy necromorphs invaded your privacy in an insipid landscape of black and bogey green. Along with being a visual bore and a respawning spot for enemies, the marker was also laughably simple to destroy, with its weakness being the equivalent of a massive bullseye. Oh, and Nicole's screams of betrayal were inadvertently hilarious. It was a final boss fight so bad it even made the cinematic and action-heavy set pieces in Dead Space 3 appear way better in comparison. 5. Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. For a series that is famous for its original and groundbreaking boss battles, the bosses in The Phantom Pain were terribly unimaginative and straightforward. The first boss battle was a sniper showdown with the stupidly outfitted Quiet, and while it could have been an anxious game of patience for newcomers, for series veterans it was nothing more than a shallow copy of Sniper Wolf and The End. Yevgeny Borisovich Volgin, don't think I nailed that there, but anyway, the man on fire was up next, and he was an underwhelming breeze so long as you had a children's water gun in your arsenal. Then there was Sahelanthropus. Again, don't think I nailed that either, but moving on. A transformer who looked cool with his sword, but was effortlessly conquerable with a rocket launcher, a rock to hide behind, and the ability to dodge slowly incoming missiles. And as the cherry on top, Skullface, the game's main antagonist we rarely ever saw, abruptly died, and his parasite unit disappeared without having made any impact on the narrative. For any other franchise, these bosses may have passed for sufficient, but for Metal Gear, they were shockingly bad. 4. Batman Arkham Knight. Batman is everyone's favourite superhero because of its iconic rogues gallery, and although not every boss fight was satisfying in Arkham Asylum, City or Origins, they at least gave us unforgettable battles with the likes of Scarecrow, Mr. Freeze and Deathstroke. Arkham Knight, however, never provided even one boss fight near befitting of the Caped Crusader's legendary adversaries. Lackluster boss battles are bad enough, but the manner in which Rocksteady subjected the Dark Knight's villains to the Batmobile was insulting. Deathstroke, a skilled expert in hand-to-hand combat, should not have been wasted in a tank. And for those who were spared of being humiliated by the developer's new favourite toy, Two-Face, the Penguin, Mr. Pig and Killer Croc, they were all relegated to being useless goons found amongst dozens of generic thugs. Even the worst boss fights in the series' prior games were unique with their aesthetics and gameplay, but Rocksteady became lazy and just decided to recycle the Arkham Knight's bosses so they could spend more time working on the Bat Tank. It's his lack of attention and effort that hurt the most, along with how they pretended that the Arkham Knight was their own unique baddie. 3. Fable 2. Before its creator, Peter Molyneux, became one of the biggest jokes in the video games industry, Fable was considered by many a revolutionary property thanks to its deep RPG mechanics and moral system. Although the first two games were adored, the second did signal the series' imminent decline in quality, with Molyneux's obsession for everything being achieved through the press of a button demonstrated in the final boss battle with Lucian Fairfax. For a loathsome, shadowy villain who murdered your family, you'd think his demise would come from an epic struggle where you would need to have upgraded all your skills and have the right gear equipped. It did not. Instead of that, the game held your hand and spoiled your fun by essentially pausing until you gave in and pressed LT to push the monologuing adversary off a cliff. After all the work and hours required to get the best ending possible, it's not hard to understand why this anticlimactic resolution offended fans, and made a second playthrough, for an RPG no less, unthinkable. 2. Far Cry 3. Throughout its marketing campaign, the villain Ubisoft would not shut up about was Vaas, so it only made sense for him to be replaced as the main antagonist by a suited man and drug enabler. Not having the most philosophically compelling villain as the concluding boss was bad enough, but it was made even worse when the poor replacement, Hoyt, was easily bested in a mano-a-mano showdown where the quick-time events and sleep-inducing spiels were his downfall. The ink monster was automatically better thanks to requiring more from players than simply pressing buttons that appeared on the screen. But it was still not satisfying thanks to how little challenge it offered with its easily avoidable attacks. Both Hoyt and Citra were way too boring to take over from the phenomenal Vaas, and it's pretty telling that the only good thing that came out of their emergence as the main foes was a scripted game of poker. 1. Uncharted 4, A Thief's End. Although everyone loves to pretend that Naughty Dog games are perfect masterpieces, the Uncharted series has always underwhelmed with its uninspired and ridiculously easy boss battles. Navarro, Lazarevich, and Talbot were all terrible, but the most frustrating were Rafe and Nadine, due to embodying the medium sacrifice of good boss fights in its evolution to become more like movies. With Nadine, both struggles may as well have been cutscenes rather than the controllable gameplay, as no matter how quick you attacked and pressed triangle to counter, she always kicked your ass and made you humble. The concluding battle with Rafe was a little better due to your involvement being more than a mere illusion, but it was still a mundane quick-time event with easily breakable scripting, where Rafe's AI could refuse to get in the precise spot to trigger the next cinematic. But seeing as A Thief's End was a self-aware encapsulation of everything that made Uncharted Sony's most prolific property, maybe it was befitting of Naughty Dog to finish their last Nathan Drake adventure with another subpar final boss. And that's our list. Did we miss out your favourite villain? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to like, share and subscribe. We do lists every single day. Once again, my name was Rach. You can follow me on Twitter at Don'tRageQuit. We have been WhatCulture Gaming, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks, guys.